Welcome, everyone, and all our ISM members and guests for joining us for today's program hosted by ISM New Jersey. Our speaker for today is Graham Crawshaw, who will be speaking on strategic trends in logistics services, procurement's role in shaping the future. First of all, I want to say thank you, Graham, for returning and for joining our chapter and all our guests today as well.
Thank
We will
you.
be running a few polls today, everyone, so please be sure to participate because we need your input for a really good pulse from the audience today. Please also note that Graham will take any of your questions, so if you will please put them in the chat, Graham will get to them probably shortly after his presentation concludes, but we really would like to hear from you.
Yes.
Also, be sure to play, also, let me just get one thing. Also be sure, I said the comments in the chat, Graham will get to it after the presentation. So sorry for that. Now on to our speaker. Lost my spot. I am pleased to welcome back Graham Crawshaw, who is the Contact Director for CASME from the UK. Graham has the overall responsibility for the quality of CASME's Global Roundtable and Virtual Events program. Prior to joining CASME, Graham spent over 20 years working in the procurement for the music industry within an operational and marketing environment. Graham is also a fellow of SIPS, and he's also a frequent speaker for ProcureCon. And I know, Graham, I believe you have a few events that are probably coming up or in the fall. You can also share it with the audience if you'd like to. But at
Oh,
this
yes.
point,
Yeah.
definitely. And I'm not sure if you also have any online events you would like to share with the audience as well that might be good for them. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to you and just let us know where you're joining from, everybody, so we can get a good pulse of where everybody's from.
Excellent. Katie, thank you so much for that welcome. And actually I'm going to say that bit first because I am very excited. I shall be at ProcureCon East in Florida in September with my colleague Carolyn Blake. And I'll be doing lots of exciting things. And I think I'm waiting for final confirmation. I think I'm chairing day one. So anyone that is involved with ProcureCon East, then very much looking forward to meeting people in person, which is so much better. I mean, this is a compromise, but it's not as good as being in person. So excited for that, and that's I think second week of September. I can't remember the precise dates. But back to today, I'd like to give you a trends update on the logistics category. And the plan that we've got for you is I'm just briefly going to say where all of this information has come from, and then we'll get into to the details. As Kathy says, I'm Procurement Content Director at CASME, and I think many of you know that at CASME we do run over 200 events a year on a global basis, and we work with category managers to help them with their strategies, category plans, and we cover that at all those events. And it's from those events we're able to then produce different reports and documents. We also do surveys to validate and really we want to make sure that we know what is going on in procurement. And my goodness, how volatile it certainly is. We do that work across at least 20 indirect procurement categories and also those processes that go right across both indirect and direct. So whether it's supply relationship management, whether it's negotiation, or whether it's AI. And I'll be back in October, I think it is, with an AI update, which is also going to be really interesting. So looking forward to sharing that with you. So all the information I will be sharing has come from category managers that work at just some of these companies. These are the companies that allow us to use their logo, but we've over 200 in the CASME community. And you'll see they're from all sorts of different industry sectors. And as I say, most are global with teams in different parts of the world. So we're in a very fortunate position to have a lot of information to really tease out and understand what is actually happening. But my last and favorite slide about CASME is this one. Yes, we're global, which is really useful if you've got teams that are in different regions, because maturity is different, culture, the ways of working, it does differ depending where you are in the world. But the main point I always emphasize is that at CASME, we do not have any sponsors, suppliers, or consultants impacting anything that we do. So we're in a very privileged position that everything is coming from procurement category managers. So it's very much for procurement, engaging procurement. So we've got that unbiased information. And I do think that's important. And I set that scene because all that I'm going to share with you about logistics, that's the source. It has come from category managers. So that's the plan. So I want to share with you the scope, because I think my understanding is that you've got to be really careful to make sure it's clear cut what is included and what's not included, because we talk about terms, but for different companies it can mean sort of different things. So the CASME definition, which again has been built up from lots of conversation with our members as to what typically is within scope for procurement and for logistics, and you can see here on the screen. I forgot to say, not only is Kathy recording this, so the recording will be available on YouTube, which is fantastic, Kathy. We'll also share the slides with you, because I won't cover every data point. It probably get a bit too boring if I did that. But on the screen, you can sort of see what we're seeing when we talk about logistics. That's really what is in scope. And it's quite broad. It covers an awful lot. And for many companies, it's also significant spend. Now, whether it's counted as direct or indirect often depends on the organization. There's no clear-cut response to that. And I do know many companies that sort of see it so crucial to the work that they do that actually it's considered almost a direct category, and others just see it as indirect. There is no way. So whatever you do within your organization is absolutely fine. There are plenty others doing exactly the same, whatever that actually is. So that's very much the scope. I think most organizations see logistics as something that should be outsourced. I think that's very much a common theme. It's been like that for quite some time. It's so specialist that certainly in its broader sense, outsourcing is what we see. And obviously there's a lot of suppliers that are able to provide that service. You then get into the debate around 3PL, 4PL, and even 5PL. And let's face it, these definitions or examples of what is included in scope originated from the consultancy organizations that were helping companies to set this up. So it can get really confusing as everyone tries to outdo each other and say, yeah, they're now 5PL. In practice, the majority of outsourced relationships are either third-party logistics or fourth party. That fourth party being where the company that's the contracting that you're contracted with is more about the systems and the data rather than actually fulfilling all the tasks themselves. So again, it does change depending on how the company, the supplier, positions itself. So what we asked our members, and all of this information is within the last 6 months, so it's all 2025 data. And we asked, well, what do you want to outsource? What really makes sense in your organization to outsource, and where are the priorities? And I really like this sort of data because it demonstrates certainly what companies are doing, so you get a good feel for what sort of several hundred organizations are doing, but it also gives you the opportunity to almost review what you're doing and comparing it. So each of you will have your own scope of what you outsource, and depending on maturity, depending on the importance to your business, will determine what you really want to outsource. No surprise, warehousing is absolutely top of the list here. So I think many companies will start with outsourced warehousing and then slowly over time just add in different services. Now, of course, when you talk to the 3PLs and 4PLs, they'll do everything, or they say they will do everything. And so that then becomes a challenge as far as your individual suppliers as to what they can actually prove and demonstrate. They've got the capacity and the capability to actually offer to you. So 91% covering warehousing, and link with that at 81%, you've got outbound freight. You'll see there all the other activities. So we put this survey together, really trying to understand the scope of what someone might wish to put out to a 3PL and 4PL. And so you can see, yeah, there's a cross mix of different activities there. Now, I think the in-house versus outsourcing is an interesting one. And there are different reasons why certain aspects of the work may be kept in-house or may be outsourced. And our experience is it is down to your organization. What is important? For most organizations, logistics is not going to be a core competency. So you probably do want it done by a supplier that is their central function, their reason for being. But there are times when certain aspects of the logistics service is better to be controlled in-house. And the reasons for that are maybe it is down to your corporate values, your corporate objectives. But then aligned with that, if you're going to do it in-house, you obviously need the infrastructure, you need the cost structure understood, the ability to scale up. There are so many variables, but I think the message here is just rethink. What are you doing? What bits are best outsourced? And is there any aspect of that logistic scope which is better actually done in-house with a team that is correctly resourced and has got that ability? So I don't know whether that's good or not, being not clear cut, but I guess every company is different. And so it needs to be aligned to what works best for your organization. So when we see more strategic logistics, there are many of our members now that have actively outsourced absolutely all of it. And the reasons for wanting to do that are those that we've captured and had sort of conversations. I think that flexibility, that ability to scale up as and when demand changes. So if you're in a business where the supply demand of your logistics is not even, then it makes even more sense to want that flexibility of scale. I think connected with that is it costs a lot of money to set up. So where do you wish to optimize? Do you want to optimize on a certain level of logistics provision and then outsource the excess, or that where flexibility is required? Or does it make sense to actually study what your requirements are and optimize on that basis? So again, never clear cut, but at least an option to consider. The other two, it's not your core business. Most likely it is something that is a challenge for you to do effectively, and therefore calling upon expertise, calling upon a supplier that it is their core business makes an awful lot of sense. And we've seen that whole logistics industry matured over the last sort of 10 years, and therefore you really have got many more options to help you out. There are some problems, and so we asked our members, when you are struggling with logistics, that view as to what should be done in-house, what should be outsourced, the concerns that are flagged up are this loss of knowledge. Once you start down the path of completely outsourcing, you've got to adjust your internal team. We see or problems can arise if you don't do that. So if you try to still maintain your in-house team, but then outsource, the experiences, you end up with a conflict. So the ideal situation is that you've got a really almost a thin client structure, a very small number of people that are working so that the knowledge is available and not completely lost, but equally not so overhead heavy that you're not actually getting the benefit. And we also know from suppliers that if you measure them, if you get involved in too much detail, it can be a source of frustration. So, of course, you've got to manage the dependency of suppliers, which I guess goes for any outsourced activity. You become dependent on them. But I think that's about having the resilience, having the options available so that if there is a disaster, if a company fails, ceases to trade, that you're then not left in a complete mess as an organization. That was one of my nightmares years ago. I used to do quite a bit in terms of logistic contracts. And I remember the call now where I got a call from the liquidators, from the financial organization that says the company that's been doing your warehousing has just gone into insolvency. So you can just imagine the pressure, the panic to sort that out. Fortunately, then we did have a backup. We did have a plan B. And fortunately, it was very clear to identify which were our products to get them moved out and into another warehouse. But it just shows you that that risk does need to be understood and maintained. And the final point on this is just sort of what you maintain control over. What's important to you? What are you happy to let go and have a supplier manage for you? So loads of points here to get you thinking, which I'm sure you've done, but actually the feedback from our members was it needs to be a regular exercise of reviewing these things. You don't want to get comfortable. You don't want to get complacent that your existing supply base is going to continue forever and a day and can provide all that you need. So I think regularly, as part of your quarterly business reviews, maybe every year, have those more detailed conversations just so that you've got the good understanding of what's really happening as far as your supply base is concerned. We talk a lot about risk, and I think that's one area that procurement has done so much more work now, typically following on from the pandemic. It caught us out, I would suggest, most organizations, and it's not just logistics, it's many categories. But in these 5 years, we have matured, we've progressed. You know, from when I've talked about stakeholder engagement, we've got that credibility much more so now than we've probably ever had. But the risks are still there. And it's important, therefore, to have a very thorough process for reviewing risks. Now, what are they going to be? Well, there's a whole list of potential issues. And I think the one that I'm having most conversation about now is actually cybersecurity, the systems. And we've had examples recently where criminals have hacked into systems. Criminals have got third-party suppliers to provide information that has given those criminals access to networks that have then caused absolute chaos. Certainly in the UK, we've had a couple of examples where retailers have been absolutely hit and the damage has been in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So the latest one that more companies are now saying is, yeah, we've got most of the risks under control, but have we actually got our cybersecurity risks? Do the terms and conditions that we've got in place protect us? Do they give us indemnity? Do they ensure that if something has gone wrong or does go wrong, that you've got the ability then to escalate the challenge, escalate the problem and get it locked down and resolved? I would suggest it is our weak area at the moment. I say it's not just logistics contracts, it's right across, because cybersecurity is one area that we really haven't had too much experience of, and there is a tendency to perhaps not necessarily invest as much as we should. So I do know procurement throughout the world is having these sort of hard-hitting questions, doing some what-if analysis to really understand this is a risk. Are we protected enough? Because I don't think you can ever fully mitigate it. And that's the process on the screen of how companies are actually mitigating through the process. Right, enough of me talking. Let's launch a poll, which I've now just done. And we want to get some inputs from everyone that's on the call today. So which strategies are being applied to establish strategic partnerships with logistics service providers for mutual benefit? And you can select the top 3. Whilst you're thinking, I'll just read them out. So is it about supplier relationship management? Do they really count enough that they're that strategic that you want them on your SRM program? Is it about having those strategic alignment meetings and updates? Do you have a joint advisory board on continuous improvement? Do you share investment in technology, innovation and sustainability? Co-creation of customized logistics solutions? Do you have a gain share, risk reward to align objectives? Do you collaborate training programs for both clients and supply employees? And do you have IT systems integration to streamline operations? It is not a coincidence, those options that we're suggesting to you today. They have all come as a result of conversation that we've had. So we know what those main strategies look like, but I want to really drill down for the group here to understand what are your top 3? What are the priorities that we face? And we're in June 2025. So I think it's really useful to get that understanding, get that feeling. Couple more minutes just to for those that haven't responded. About half of you have responded. Go on, it's not too difficult. Just sort of give us your thoughts as to what is important, what strategies are being applied to establish that strategic partnership with your logistics service providers for mutual benefit. And I think that's the point. The relationship, it can't just be all about you. It can't be all about the supplier. It's got to be a mutual. Oh, I'm getting the message. Some people can't select. Many can. So I must admit, it's probably the gremlins that are in Zoom. So apologies there. I'm not quite sure. I don't think we can do anything, Danielle, but thank you for flagging that up. I am therefore going to end the poll and then hopefully share the results with you. You've entered more than one response, so the percentages really don't mean too much, but just look at the length of the bars. I'm not surprised. The strategic alignment, I mean, I spoke about QBRs earlier, but the strategic alignment meetings and updates are so important, followed by supplier relationship management. So that would lead me to believe that you've got those relationships in place. You are able to really drive value and work with your suppliers. Now, one point I always like to say at this point in time is, of course, it has got to be mutual. One of the challenges for logistics is it's all very well you seeing your supplier as important to you, but we then have to look at it the other way around. And I hate the phrase because it's a buzzword phrase. Are you that customer of choice? Do you make life easy for your logistics provider? Do they actually like working with you, or are you a challenge to work with? Do you pay on time? Do you share information with them, or is it a question of always firefighting? And again, just like those other points, I'd always encourage anyone to seriously think, what does that relationship look like between procurement and your logistics provider? Is it really one of trust and one where you do have that mutual respect, or is it a bit going more towards you, or is it going more towards them? I don't know. It's something to think about. So interesting. I'm going to stop share there. Now we asked this same poll across the CASME membership, and look at that. It's the same, almost. Certainly the top two. So regular strategic alignment, supplier relationship management are the top two. For the CASME members, it was followed very closely by the IT systems integration. So I don't know whether that's, if actually no, it is exactly the same. How about that? Just shows you the thought process that you're going through. This really does help understand the priorities on these contracts. So good. Excuse me. Thank you. I want to talk about sustainability in supply chain management. It's sort of a bit controversial at the moment. I mean, I'm fully aware, in fact, all of us globally are fully aware that the whole ESG agenda is not necessarily flavor of the month at the moment in North America, in part driven by what's going on with the current administration. But actually, when you talk to people globally about sustainability in supply chain, it's actually one of those things that's not optional. You've got to be looking at it. So regardless of where you see things at the moment, I think the message is you've got to do something. It's also very important that you perhaps continue. So even if your company, let me explain that because that's not very clear, is it? But even if your company is seeing it as a lesser priority than it was, maybe net zero targets have been pushed to one side, maybe you're no longer reporting some of the work that's being done. But the message I've certainly heard from companies is keep it ticking over, even if it's on in the background. We'd say in the UK on the back burner. I don't know if that's the phrase you use, but it's harder if it suddenly then does become important to get back on track if you've discontinued everything. So the message is, even if it's not a priority, don't ignore it. Don't be in a situation where you're not doing anything, but just sort of work on some things. So there's very much, when we're talking about sustainability within the supply chain, we're looking whether it's a green supply chain in terms of the suppliers you're using, whether you actually have got transparency so that you fully understand what is going on within your supply chain, and then also whether it actually is becoming completely circular. And I know from talking with organizations, there's so much work going on of like recycling, moving, whether it's pallets or crates, so that they can be reused rather than completely replaced. So there's a lot going on there. So some detail. When we talk about green procurement within logistics, we've got 6 points here on the screen. That is typically what CASME members are saying is important and that you're working on. Pretty obvious: energy efficiency, recyclability, waste reduction. But I think the second phase is then more about aligning to standards and then reducing carbon emissions and then studying that life cycle. So it may be one of these things that you're putting to a side, but believe me, it's definitely one area that's not been forgotten, and companies are actively sort of doing that. So when we talk about low carbon, we also, if I didn't include this slide, but we've talked a lot about electric vehicles recently. In practice, with the exception of cars, it's far too premature. There just isn't the infrastructure, there isn't the ability to charge, and there isn't the size of the vehicles and the loads that you're looking to carry. It's just not really viable, and I don't see any country in the world actually being successful other than cars. And let's face it, even with cars, it could be a massive challenge in terms of the infrastructure for charging vehicles. So it's an ongoing development, I would say. There is a trend towards at least testing out and seeing what's possible as manufacturers come up with new sort of vehicles that do allow electricity to be considered. So low carbon is important, and companies are actively investigating. So you can see on the screen, this is what they're looking at. This is the process that they're doing. I'm not going to read it out. I'm sure you've read it in the time that I've been sort of talking that through. It's not gone away. It's just a project that should be considered by organizations and progress made and reported on, especially if you've got some target that needs to be achieved. And actually, an aside point, really interesting conversation around those companies that focus on scope 3 emissions, focus on, well, 1, 2, and 3 emissions, but focus on a date in the future whereby they want to be net zero. Many companies have pushed that date back. So it may be 2035, because let's face it, 2030 is not too far away now. It may be even 2040. But rather than say that's 15 years away, actually consider what is your duration of your contracts. Many logistics contracts may be 3, 4, 5, even longer. So in terms of the possibility to go with an RFP to the market, it's not 15 years you should think about. It's almost 2, 3 generations of contract. So if you want to start getting information to help you within the scope of your tender, within your RFP, then actually you haven't got too long to get that organized. And I really like that way of thinking. It's not about the 15 years that really you can just kick into the long grass. Again, hope that's not a UK phrase, but it's very much something that does need to be considered and planned each and every time you go to the market. Okay, second poll for today. Let's launch poll 2, and thank you for Kathy for typing all these out for us. What approaches are being applied by procurement to increase sustainability in the logistics category? So you've heard what companies are doing, and we want to find out what you're doing. Options include establishing ambitious sustainability targets across the entire supply chain, measuring energy usage and scope 1 emissions related to internal logistics, selecting suitable logistics solutions, developing a logistics network that reduce goods transportation distances. Last 10 days ago, we were talking about paper and packaging and that sort of 400-mile maximum that you would wish to be shipping packaging, because it just doesn't make sense financially, let alone from a sustainability perspective. Then incorporating sustainable solutions and renewable energy sources into the design of new warehousing facilities, defining metrics to measure the sustainability of global logistics operations and identify improvements, and then identifying waste and increasing the accuracy of the data used to record it. Select 3, because actually you could probably tick all of them, but that's not helpful. We want to see the top 3 that's most important to everyone on the call today. So I'll just give you a few more seconds, having explained all of those options to you. Once again, all of those options have come from discussions at CASME events, so I'm not surprised it's difficult to really home in on the top 3. And in practice, what you're seeing here is all the activity that procurement is working on. So by all means, when you get the slides, you can sort of review this and again, consider where your position is relative to what many other companies are doing. Okay, interest of time, let's end the poll there and share the results of the second poll. Again, you can't look at the percentages. You've got to look at the length of the blue line because you've had multiple choices. Number 1, measuring energy usage, scope 1 emissions related to internal logistics. Really interesting and fascinating to know whether scope 1 is definitely the priority above scope 3. a conversation for another day. The next length of bar is defining the metrics, the sustainability of global logistics operations to identify improvements. If you don't record it, if you don't track it, you can't measure it. That old saying is very true here. So no surprise, that is the activity that is important so that you can really track and understand what's going on. And then we go down. Okay, let me stop the sharing of that poll, and I'm going to share the CASME results on this one. I'm just trying to think. Pretty similar. So this is a global sort of position here. So selecting sustainable logistics providers is longest one. So that didn't come up as much in the poll that we've just done, but I'm not going to worry too much about that fine detail. The targets across the supply chain. So interesting, globally, that scope 1 emissions is much, much less of a priority. No idea. You do these surveys, and you think, oh yeah, you can predict the results. You never quite know how people respond. So that's why I always say, look, almost consider all of these and then align it to your organization and what's important to you. So yeah, interesting to do that comparison. I wanted to include this chart with, what this is. This a presentation where we've not mentioned AI? That's going to be a first. Almost any event you go to now, everyone is like thrusting AI down your neck, but we haven't done that today because there's no need. What we need to actually look on is where are we up to with the technological or tech solutions that the suppliers offering. You want the suppliers to take the lead in this area. What can they bring to your business that they've got proven and established that is going to help? Again, this isn't new. We've been doing and talking about some of these things for a very long time. The technology isn't the latest, so I think that needs to be sort of considered. GPS tracking, that was what I was meaning. That's not new. That's been around. So no surprise, 90% of suppliers can offer that. Similarly, online booking platforms to help you with your planning around logistics. Interesting, when you actually look at it, AI, let's mention it again, is really low down on the list. And we've done some sort of benchmarking at different aspects or coming from a different angle. And it's still early days. Many companies still do not allow the use of AI. They don't want their suppliers using AI because there may be errors, inaccuracies, and sources of information can be difficult to track down. I know many companies that prohibit or demand suppliers advise the point that AI is being used in any of the services that they're providing to you. Controlling that by contract really does give you that transparency. So again, another takeaway point for you to consider. The others there, I'll let you have a look at. You could sort of see what is being offered and what then can be accepted and used by procurement. So how will AI impact? And you notice that is in the future tense because it's still so early days. There's also a lot of suppliers talking about AI, and in practice it's not AI, it's either some form of machine learning or just processing of data efficiently. So we've got to be really careful, and we'll cover that at our next session that will be talking at, where we say and look at what is procurement actually doing and how can AI actually help. This is the list as our members reported. So again, all from procurement, not from the suppliers. And it shows the priorities there. I've kept that at quite high level. So rather than have too much sort of detail, but it shows you the sorts of conversations that you can then be having with your suppliers about the different types of functionality and technology they can offer to you. This is so closely aligned, I thought I'd include it. And I know it probably seems a bit bizarre having a Brit in the UK talking about tariffs, but I'm talking about tariffs throughout the world. I was in Australia last month in May, and even though they're 15,000 miles away from the middle of North America, tariffs is on the agenda. It's impacting everybody, completely disrupting global supply chains, and that's going to get worse before it probably gets better. So we collected data in April and published this in May, so only last month, to just really try to understand what's procurement doing. These tariffs are not in our control. So it's how are we managing? How are we adding value to the business? It's a time of great volatility. So no surprise, 78% of our members saying, look, actually redesigning, rethinking supply chains, taking into account what is that going to look like. Now, since the pandemic, we've got a better understanding of where stuff comes from, which countries it's coming from. But the feedback I'm getting recently is you probably don't have that in as much detail as you need now that we're hearing different countries are going to have different percentages of tariffs. So it is impacting production. It is impacting domestic raw material production and capacity in North America. And it is going to have an impact on costs. Now, I think what I'm also hearing very loud and clear is companies demanding that they want transparency. They want to understand how prices may change, because we know, again, seen examples of suppliers trying to take advantage of tariffs and hike up costs in anticipation of tariffs. Well, that's clearly unacceptable, not going to work. So I do know quite a number of organizations now saying the tariff cost must be a separate line item on both the purchase order and on the invoice. That gives transparency. That enables you to be flexible as tariffs change. So I think that is a really sort of important point and a really big one where procurement can add value. But you know what we can do is, building on our relationship with stakeholders, we could be in a very strong position. So we're the ones that can talk with the stakeholders, tell them exactly what is and what isn't happening. We can model the risk management, as I was sharing earlier in the presentation, and include disaster recovery processes as well. More and more companies are looking at TCO, total cost of ownership, to really understand and get that transparency to be able to make those so what or should cost models. I've never seen so much activity on wanting total cost of ownership and should cost modeling. Such is the importance of getting suppliers, forcing suppliers to be transparent with their activities. And also, of course, it makes sense for procurement to work with suppliers. So when we said to our members, what are you doing? And bear in mind, 75% of them said they have operations in North America and they are being impacted by tariff changes. Then this is the general guidance that makes sense to follow according to procurement. And I basically, that's a summary of what I've just been sort of talking about. So I'm sure you're doing something around that, but let us know. And yeah, hopefully that's a value, hearing what procurement has said. That is my update. I'm going to stop sharing. That is my update on what CASME members are saying is going on in the logistics category. So as always, very volatile, lots going on. Yeah, that's where we're up to. So delighted to, well, certainly have any questions. I can't guarantee any answers, and this is where I'm always put under pressure to see how much I know. personally, I cover all of indirect procurement, so it's always a bit of a challenge. But equally, I'm always talking about it all day, so I have a good stab at being able to answer the questions. So, Kathy, did that all make sense? I'm always keen. If you disagreed with anything that I've said, just bear in mind, I haven't made it up. We haven't used AI. It's not been an academic exercise. It has come from hundreds of category managers who have fed back, contributed to conversation and answered benchmarking. So that gives me the authority to be quite assertive in some of the statements that I can make. And I always love doing that.
But we did get one question in during the presentation. Which industry areas, FMCG, tech, pharma, manufacturing, tend to outsource more than others among CASME members?
You know what? You've hit on the four that I would say are the most outsourcing to then compared to other industry sectors to then drill down. I'm going to say, you know what? I don't know. It would be wrong of me to guess on that one. I would say more and more are outsourcing. So to actually narrow it down and suggest that one sector is outsourcing more, I think it's more complicated with pharma, where it's more regulated, but equally there are the specialist suppliers that provide that. The ability to change is more difficult with pharmaceuticals. But as far as outsourcing, yeah, I'm going to say I don't know. I would say all of those are the industry sectors that are very likely to want to be outsourcing.
Okay, thank you. You try to answer it.
I tried, but equally, I'm not going to make it up when I haven't really. When I don't know the answer. I'm not going to say I do when I don't, because
That's the
and
best.
to be
That's the
honest,
best thing.
I can't even think of a way to get you the answer. So that's not the sort of data that we would have access to. We're focused more on the strategy for developing categories and giving people something to think about. And that's been my objective today, to share with you what procurement is doing, and then for you to see, well, okay, that works, that doesn't work. We're really mature in this area, or we're less mature in another. So, you know what? That's the good thing about procurement. That's what makes it so exciting, because every company is different. If we were all the same, if it could all be done by AI, our roles would be eliminated. The good thing is the fact that we're all about relationships, managing these suppliers, communicating with the business. That's the future, our relationship management aspect of procurement. And I say that makes it a really fun function to work. And I can't think why anyone would want to work in any other department apart from procurement.
If anybody has any questions for Graham, please be sure
We've
to.
just got another one. Oh my goodness, how am I going to do? The pressure is on now.
Oh, okay. All
What are
right.
your tips for non-logistic sourcing leaders to get exposure sensitivity to folding logistics into their sourcing strategies, Incoterms, insurance, costing? Um, I know, again, in the if you're in the UK, I would say the Institute of Logistics is a great one. I'm not sure what's the equivalent, and that's probably not correct to promote that when we're on an ISM conference. But I mean, I think those organisations that do help logistics certainly are ones that would give you the very latest Incoterms. That's a relatively. I mean, I'm always seeing stuff on LinkedIn, people trying to explain it in different terms. And I love some of the charts that have been developed. I remember when I first got involved with Incoterms, far too many years ago, it was like a table and it was a nightmare to look it up. Now you get all sorts of fancy diagrams explaining free on board or delivered duty paid or all the other sort of Incoterms that there are. So I think it really is just using your network. If there is an institute that looks after logistics, being an associate. In fact, I was an associate member of the UK Logistics Institute when I was heavily involved with actually moving compact discs around the world and moving raw materials. So it is useful, but you're asking the wrong person, asking a Brit for that sort of information, I'm afraid. Unless Kathy knows, but
Oh, of
probably
course not.
no. You're asking to. If anyone does know, then Um, I'm sure they could say three polls. No, I think we lied. There are only two.
Two.
Did I say three? I can't count. It's been a long
We
day.
usually do three. I think
Oh, do
that's
we?
why.
Yeah. I don't know why we only did two. Apologies. I think you probably feel hard done by now. I only had two when we did this original, so apologies there. I will make up for it when we next do our the next one in the fall.
Thank you very much. We know you're listening. Okay, thanks. We appreciate that. Graham, did you have any closing thoughts before we end today?
It's volatile out there. I think that's my closing point, regardless of what you're doing in procurement. We thought back in fall 2024 that this year was going to be a nice, stable year. We'd not had stability for a very long time. How wrong we were. It's been very volatile. We're only halfway through the year in a couple of days. What is going to surprise us in the next 6 months? So there's a lot going on, and procurement can add value. Have those conversations with suppliers, have those with your stakeholders, and really deliver value, knowing that however volatile it is, we've got the answers. We can really help the organization. So I think we're in a very privileged position to be able to do that. So I hope that's been of interest, giving you something to think about. I think that's my main objective for today. And thank you for having me, Kathy.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Graham, again for coming on to the show today and presenting all this material. And we do appreciate everybody in the audience for joining us as well. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out the program. The recording will be available probably, like in an hour or so. I'll be sending it out to everybody. And again, thank you all for joining us. And Graham will be back. I think it's in the fall. You're going to be back
It is,
with
yeah,
a
on
few more.
AI. So very excited for that update. So yeah, join us then.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you all. Goodbye for now.